I'm 52, and I've spent most of my adult life trying to be a good mother. I'm not saying I've been perfect. I've made mistakes, some big, some small. But I never thought my own daughter would completely erase me from her life. And I definitely never thought she'd try to take my grandson away from me. I raised my daughter, Emily, mostly on my own. Her father left when she was 2. I worked nights, weekends, holidays, whatever it took. She had food, clothes, school trips, birthday parties. I didn't have much, but she had everything I could possibly give. She was always a quiet, smart girl. A little sensitive, sometimes a bit too serious for her age, but I figured that was just her personality. She did well in school, made it to college, and then moved across the country at 22. Said she wanted a fresh start. I thought it was exciting for her, maybe hard for me, but I supported her. We kept in touch. Calls, texts, holiday visits. Nothing felt wrong, until one visit, about 5 years ago, when she came home and told me she wanted to talk as adults. That night changed everything. She confronted me about things from her childhood, moments I'd forgotten or didn't even realize had stuck with her. She said I was emotionally unavailable. That I guilt-tripped her about everything. That I made her feel like she was responsible for my happiness. I was floored. I tried to explain, to tell her I never meant to hurt her, but she wasn't interested in explanations. She told me she needed space. Then she left. And the next time I tried to call her, my number was blocked. She cut me off completely. No warning. Just gone. A year passed. Then 2. I sent birthday cards. Christmas gifts. Letters. Nothing came back. She was gone from my life. Until one day, I got a call from a hospital social worker. A young woman named Lauren had given birth and left the baby behind. The emergency contact? Me. She was 19. I barely remembered her. She was the daughter of one of my coworkers who died a few years back. I'd helped Lauren out when she was a teenager, let her crash on my couch when things at home got bad. We lost touch after a while. Now she had a newborn boy. And no one else to take him. So I took him in. No hesitation. He was 5 pounds of nothing, fragile and red and squirmy. I named him Adam. I didn't think about Emily. I just knew I couldn't let that baby go into the system. 2 months later, Emily came back into my life out of nowhere, unannounced, standing on my porch like a ghost from a dream. And she wasn't alone. She had a lawyer. What she told me next made my stomach turn. Emily didn't ask how I was. She didn't ask about the baby. She barely looked at me. She handed me a letter, legal-looking, thick paper, formal language, and said she was seeking temporary guardianship of Adam. I couldn't even process it. I asked her why. Why now? After years of silence? She said I was too old to raise a child again. That it wasn't healthy for a baby to be raised by someone with my track record. I asked her what that even meant, and she just said, "You know what I mean." I honestly didn't. I was still in shock. Adam was only 2 months old. I'd been doing everything, doctor's appointments, sleepless nights, bottles, diapers. I'd rearranged my whole life for him, and now my own daughter was telling me I wasn't fit to care for him? She told me she'd been following everything, quietly, online. Apparently, a mutual acquaintance had posted about me being a grandma again, and she dug into it. She even admitted she'd driven past my house a few times just to see what was going on. I didn't know whether to be creeped out or heartbroken. I asked her what her real goal was. And she told me, flat out, she wanted to adopt Adam. Not foster. Not help. Adopt. She said she and her partner had been talking about having kids but decided against pregnancy because of health concerns. And when she saw I had taken in a baby, she thought it was a sign. A sign. Like Adam was just a cosmic answer to her family planning problem. I stood there holding that letter, shaking. I told her I wasn't giving him up. That he was safe and loved and bonded to me already. But she didn't care. She said the court would decide what's best for him. I wanted to scream, cry, collapse, but I didn't. I just nodded, walked back into the house, and closed the door behind me. And that night, while feeding Adam at 3 a.m., I finally let myself cry, for the first time in years. I had no idea if the law would be on my side. I didn't have money for lawyers. Emily, on the other hand, had a tech job, a stable partner, a home. She looked like a model parent on paper. And I looked like an aging woman clinging to a child who wasn't even mine by blood. But what she didn't know, what no one knew, was that I had already started the adoption process. And the paperwork was almost done. The day after Emily dropped that legal bomb on me, I called the caseworker who'd helped me start the adoption process for Adam. I didn't tell her everything, just that there might be a complication. She promised to check the status and call me back. I spent the rest of the day walking around the house like a ghost. Every creak in the floor, every sound from the street outside, I thought it might be her, coming back. I kept replaying everything she said, especially that word, adopt. She made it sound so normal. Like she was doing me a favor. But it didn't feel like a favor. It felt like a punishment. Emily hadn't called me in 3 years. Not for my birthday. Not for the holidays. Not even when I was hospitalized for pneumonia last winter. I wasn't good enough to talk to, but suddenly I was raising a baby and she wanted back in? Except not with me. With him. I kept thinking about Adam. His tiny hands, the way he fell asleep on my chest, the way he smiled in his sleep like he was dreaming about something soft and warm. He didn't know anything about courts or lawyers or betrayal. All he knew was me. And I knew I couldn't lose him. When the caseworker finally called back, I held my breath the entire time she talked. She said the final hearing to approve the adoption had been scheduled for next week. One more week and Adam would legally be mine. But I couldn't relax, because Emily wasn't backing off. The next day, I got an email from her lawyer. Not a letter, an email. Like this was some casual business dispute. It said she was petitioning for emergency guardianship based on concerns over the child's environment. No specific claims. Just vague language designed to make me look unstable. I felt sick. I hadn't even told many people I was adopting Adam. The only ones who knew were a few close friends, my pastor, and the caseworker. I hadn't posted online. I hadn't bragged or begged for attention. So how had she found out? And why was she moving so fast? Then something hit me. I opened Facebook, went to the profile of my neighbor, this sweet older woman named Carol who loves to garden and always waves when she sees me. And there it was. A picture of me on the front porch, holding Adam. Captioned, our lovely neighbor and her sweet new grandson. So much joy on this block. Carol meant well. But Emily must have seen that post. That's how it started. That's how my own daughter decided to try and take my baby away. The next few days felt like a countdown to war. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat much. Every knock on the door made my chest tighten. I kept expecting someone, Emily, her lawyer, Child Protective Services, to show up and just take Adam from my arms. But no one came. Instead, I got a second email. This one was colder. It listed off things Emily claimed made me unfit, that I was living on a fixed income, that I had a history of poor emotional boundaries, that I was socially isolated, and that I had no biological relation to the child. I stared at that last one for a long time. No biological relation. Like that was the final nail. I raised Emily by myself. I cleaned up her vomit, braided her hair, stayed up through her teenage breakdowns. I kept the lights on when I could barely afford my own meals. And now she was implying I wasn't family enough? Meanwhile, Adam, this tiny boy who'd been abandoned at birth, had only known my arms, my smell, my lullabies. But because I wasn't his blood, I was somehow replaceable? It didn't matter to her that I was the one getting up 5 times a night, that I'd memorized every ounce of his routine, that I knew the exact way to rock him when he cried. None of that was on paper. And in court, paper counts. That night, I called the caseworker again. I finally told her everything, about Emily, about the legal threats, about my fear she might actually succeed. To her credit, she didn't panic. She told me that unless a judge saw real, immediate danger, Emily had no legal grounds to take emergency custody. But that didn't calm me. Because Emily wasn't stupid, she worked in tech, but her partner? A paralegal. That's when I realized, this wasn't impulsive. It wasn't emotional. It was planned. She'd found out I had a baby. She'd watched from the sidelines, gathered information, and waited until the adoption was close to being finalized before stepping in. Why? Because once the paperwork was signed, she'd have no shot. It was now or never for her. And if she was willing to drag me through the mud, maybe even lie, just to get Adam, then I had to do something I never imagined I would. I had to fight my own daughter in court. The day I called a lawyer was the day everything in me shifted. I had never hired one before. Never needed to. But after 3 sleepless nights and 2 panic attacks in my kitchen, I knew I couldn't face this alone. I found a family attorney through a friend at church, an older woman named Ruth who'd handled custody cases for decades. She didn't sugarcoat anything. She said, if your daughter's got a legal team and a motive, we're not playing defense. We're building a case. And just like that, I was no longer just a grandma trying to raise a child. I was a legal guardian with a target on my back. Ruth had me gather everything, doctor visit records, the foster placement paperwork, the photos, the letters from my pastor and friends, even my calendar showing Adam's feeding and sleeping schedules. We made a binder. 2 inches thick. We met 3 times that week. On the outside, I was keeping up appearances, pushing Adam in the stroller, waving to neighbors, going to the store like everything was normal. But inside, I was bracing for impact. Because Ruth was clear, if Emily filed first and got the right judge, things could get messy. Even if I won, it might mean months of court hearings, supervised visits, character assessments. I'd read stories about cases like that, where family members got ripped apart in court while the child sat in limbo. But Ruth also gave me one piece of advice that stuck with me. She said, judges don't just look at facts. They look at patterns. And if your daughter's coming out of the woodwork after years of silence, it's going to raise eyebrows. Still, the doubt crept in. Because Emily wasn't just showing up with lawyers. She started calling people. First, my sister. Then an old coworker I hadn't talked to in over a year. Then my church. She was trying to rally people to her side. I started getting weird messages. Hey, just checking in. Everything okay with the baby? Or, your daughter reached out, said she's worried about you. Worried. That word burned a hole in me. Emily hadn't said a single word to me in 3 years, and now she was worried? No. She was trying to make me look unstable. Quietly. Strategically. Like planting seeds in the ground and waiting for people to start questioning my sanity. And I almost cracked, until I saw what she posted on her private Instagram. It was a photo of a baby blanket and a crib. Captioned, manifesting motherhood. Praying for a miracle. White heart baby. She wasn't just trying to get Adam. She was claiming him already. When I saw that post, something in me snapped. It wasn't just the blanket or the crib or the cutesy emojis. It was the certainty in her words. Like Adam was already hers. Like this was a birth announcement in disguise. Like I didn't exist. I sat there staring at that post, hands trembling. She had blocked me years ago, but I saw it through a dummy account I never thought I'd use again. She didn't even try to hide it. There were dozens of comments from her friends, all heart emojis and "so happy for you" messages. One even said, "You'll be such a great mom, Em. Great mom. To my baby." I wanted to scream. But I didn't. Instead, I sent the screenshot to Ruth. She called me within 5 minutes. Her voice was steady, but I could tell she was angry too. Not at me, at the audacity. She told me the post was gold. Not just emotional manipulation, but a public record of intent. Because in court, that kind of thing matters. It shows mindset. It shows expectation. It shows entitlement. But just when I thought I had the upper hand, I got the notice. Emily had filed for emergency temporary custody. The court date was in 3 days. It was real now. I sat on my porch that night after Adam went to sleep, just rocking in silence. I felt like I was back in my 20s again, scared, tired, uncertain of everything. I thought about how I'd survived raising a child alone before. About all the nights Emily had ear infections and fevers and night terrors, and how I never once left her side. And now that same child was trying to erase me completely. I wondered if maybe I'd been too hard on her. Too strict. Maybe I had leaned on her too much when she was little, vented when I shouldn't have, made her feel like she had to be my emotional support instead of just being a kid. Maybe this was her way of punishing me for that. But Adam wasn't a weapon. And I wasn't going to let her use him like one. The day before the hearing, Ruth handed me a folder. Inside were witness statements, my pastor, 2 neighbors, my doctor, and a former teacher from Emily's old school. All people who had known me for years. People who saw how I was raising Adam now. People who remembered who I was when I was raising her. Ruth looked me in the eyes and said, "You're not walking in there alone." And I didn't. But the person who did walk in with Emily the next morning wasn't who I expected. It was Lauren. Adam's birth mother. I don't think I've ever felt my heart drop so fast. Lauren walked into that courtroom like she belonged there, clutching a small purse and trying to avoid my eyes. She looked nothing like the girl I remembered, her hair longer, her posture straighter, her clothes clean and pressed. But that wasn't what threw me. It was the fact she was there at all. Emily didn't look surprised. In fact, she smiled. Like she was proud of whatever stunt she was about to pull. I leaned over to Ruth, whispering, "What is she doing here? She hasn't seen Adam in months." Ruth didn't answer right away. She was already flipping through the emergency petition file that Emily's lawyer had just submitted. Then she let out a low, grim breath. "She's listed as a supporting party," Ruth said. "Emily's team is using her to question your legal standing." Of course. Of course. Because even though Lauren had abandoned Adam at the hospital, signed over temporary custody, walked away without so much as a goodbye, she was still the biological mother. Which meant, if she sided with Emily, she could contest the adoption and back Emily's petition as family placement. It was a loophole. And they were diving straight through it. I couldn't believe it. Lauren. The same girl I'd taken in when she was 17 and homeless. The same girl I'd fed, clothed, consoled. The same girl who, after giving birth, sobbed and told me she wasn't meant to be a mother. Now she was standing across the room, acting like I'd stolen something from her. When the judge entered, everything went quiet. The hearing wasn't long, just a preliminary session to review the emergency motion. Emily's lawyer argued that Adam should be placed with a younger, more stable family unit. They cited my age, my income, my lack of blood relation. And then they brought up Lauren. She stood and said she was reconsidering her decision to give Adam up. I wanted to yell, to scream, to demand answers. But I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. Because then it was Ruth's turn. She didn't raise her voice or posture up. She calmly laid out the timeline. The abandonment. The custody forms. The pediatrician letters. The fact that Lauren hadn't once tried to contact Adam since leaving the hospital. And then she submitted the Instagram post. The judge stared at it for a full minute. We didn't get a ruling that day. The judge said more documentation was needed before any decisions could be made. He set a formal hearing for the following week. But before we left, he turned to Emily's lawyer and said something I'll never forget. In cases like this, intent matters. And just like that, for the first time since this nightmare began, I saw a crack in their strategy. Emily's plan wasn't bulletproof after all. But we weren't in the clear yet. Because that night, Lauren showed up at my front door. Alone. I stood in the doorway, frozen. Lauren didn't look angry. She didn't look smug. She looked nervous. Like she wasn't sure if she should even be there. I didn't invite her in. I just stepped outside and closed the door behind me, careful not to wake Adam. For a few seconds, we just stared at each other. Then she said something I didn't expect. I didn't know she was going to use me like that. I didn't say anything. I didn't trust my voice. I was still trying to process how the same girl who'd handed me her newborn son without blinking was now helping someone else take him away. She went on, told me that Emily had reached out months ago. Said she was Adam's aunt, wanted to know more about what happened. She said all the right things, that she cared, that she wanted to help, that maybe Lauren could still be part of Adam's life. Lauren said she felt guilty. That when she left the hospital, she meant to come back. But time passed. She got overwhelmed. Ashamed. When Emily found her, it felt like a second chance to fix her mistake. And at first, Emily just listened. Asked questions. Bought her lunch. Gave her rides. Then came the forms. Statements. Affidavits. A carefully worded letter about regret and maternal rights. Lauren said she didn't even read most of it. She just signed what Emily told her to. I asked her if she actually wanted Adam back. Her eyes got wide. She shook her head immediately. No, she said. I can't be a mom. I know that. I knew it then, and I know it now. So I asked her the obvious, why come to court? She hesitated. Then she said Emily promised her money. Not a bribe, at least not directly. Emily said she'd help her get a job, find a new place, maybe even help her go back to school. But only if she cooperated. I stood there in stunned silence. Emily had manipulated this girl. Dug up the birth mother of the child I was raising, convinced her to sign paperwork, appear in court, and dangle a better life in front of her, all to make her case stronger. I should have been furious. But all I felt was hollow. Lauren asked me what I was going to do. I told her I was going to protect Adam. No matter what. She nodded, reached into her bag, and pulled out an envelope. Inside was a notarized letter. A signed statement retracting her support of Emily's case. She said she'd already sent a copy to the court. Then she left. No goodbye. No apology. Just silence. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something I hadn't let myself feel. Hope. The morning of the next court hearing, I didn't shake. I didn't cry. I dressed Adam, fed him, packed his bag like it was any other day. Because this time, I wasn't walking in afraid. I had Ruth. I had the letter from Lauren. I had weeks of proof that Adam was safe, cared for, thriving. And I had something Emily didn't, truth. When we arrived, Emily was already there. Her partner sat beside her, stiff and silent. Emily didn't look at me once. Her lawyer did, though. He looked rattled. He already knew. Lauren's letter had been filed the day before. Ruth leaned over and whispered, "Watch how quickly they pivot." And she was right. Suddenly, Emily's lawyer didn't mention Lauren at all. All that noise about blood ties and maternal reconsideration disappeared. Instead, they tried a new angle, questioning my physical ability to care for a baby long-term. They brought up my age, again. My modest retirement savings. The fact that I'd once posted in a parenting forum asking for help with colic. It was weak. And desperate. But they tried. Ruth countered every point. She presented Adam's medical records, which showed he was healthy, gaining weight, and developmentally on track. She submitted letters from my doctor confirming I was in excellent health for my age. She showed photos of Adam in our home, smiling, swaddled, safe. Then she dropped the final piece. The social worker's full report. It was glowing. It detailed how quickly Adam bonded with me. How I'd created a consistent, loving routine. How the home environment was stable, clean, nurturing. It ended with a strong recommendation. I believe this adoption is in the best interest of the child. Emily's lawyer tried to object, said it wasn't about stability, but capacity for longevity. The judge cut him off. You've argued two separate strategies today, he said. Which tells me your client's position is not grounded in concern for the child, but in her own personal motivations. I looked over. Emily's face was stone. But her hands were shaking. Then the judge turned to me. He asked one question. Are you prepared to continue raising this child as your own, no matter how long or difficult the road ahead may be? I answered without hesitation. Yes, I already am. And that was it. The judge denied Emily's petition. Permanently. But what he said next? That changed everything. The judge took a deep breath and looked between us and me, then Emily. He folded his hands and spoke slowly, but clearly. I believe this case is not about the welfare of the child, but about unresolved family dynamics. Miss Richards, he looked directly at Emily, you may believe you're acting out of concern. But trying to take a child from the only parent he's known, based on personal resentment, is not how we define love in this courtroom. Then he turned to me again. I'm finalizing the adoption today. Just like that. Those 5 words hit harder than anything I've ever felt. My knees buckled a little. Ruth placed her hand gently on my arm, steadying me. I looked down at Adam, asleep in my lap, unaware that his entire life had just changed, again. Only this time, for good. Emily didn't speak. She stood up slowly, her face blank, and walked out of the courtroom with her lawyer trailing behind. Her partner stayed seated for a moment longer, then followed, looking down the whole time. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't even glance back. But the judge wasn't finished. Before we adjourned, he issued a recommendation for therapeutic family mediation. Not a requirement. Just an option. He said it might help heal some of the wounds that brought us here. I didn't know how to feel about that. Because in that moment, I wasn't angry. I was just tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of looking at my own daughter and feeling like a stranger. Tired of wondering what part of our past broke her enough to think this was the right thing to do. But more than anything, I was tired of being scared that someone could take Adam away. Because now? No one could. The adoption was finalized that afternoon. I signed the papers, held him close, and cried in the hallway while Ruth stood by and quietly called it one of the strangest and most satisfying cases she'd ever seen. That night, I rocked Adam to sleep under the same lullaby I sang to Emily when she was his age. And I whispered to him, "You're safe now. I've got you." Because I do. I always will. Update, it's been 4 months. Adam is crawling now, loud and determined. He loves the sound of crinkly wrappers and hates naps unless they're in my arms. My house is a mess, my hair's always frizzy, and I haven't slept through the night in weeks, but I've never felt more alive. Emily hasn't contacted me since that day in court. I don't know if she ever will. And honestly, maybe that's for the best. Sometimes love means letting go. Sometimes it means holding on. And sometimes it means knowing exactly when to do both.